All right, folks, gather round because we're about to dive into a topic that's thornier than a cactus wearing a barbed wire sweater. We're talking about why Israel is at war. Now, I know what you're thinking. Haven't they always been at war? Well, yes and no. It's complicated, like trying to untangle your earbuds after they've been in your pocket for 5 minutes, but with more explosions. This conflict is older than Betty White was, God rest her soul. It's been going on for so long that even your history teacher's history teacher would need a refresher. But don't worry, we're going to break it down in a way that even I can understand. And trust me, that's saying something. People have strong opinions about it, so we're going to try to look at this as objectively as possible. We're going to cover everything from land disputes to security concerns, from failed peace talks to the impact on everyday people. Let's start with the basics, the land itself. Imagine you're playing a game of Risk, but instead of plastic armies, you've got real people, and instead of a board game, it's actual lives at stake. The main areas of dispute are Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. First up, Jerusalem. This city is holier than a Swiss cheese in a church. It's sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Imagine if Disney World, the Vatican, and Mecca were all crammed into one city. That's Jerusalem. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim it as their capital. It's like two kids fighting over the front seat of the car, except the car is a holy city and the kids have armies. Next, we got the West Bank. It's a chunk of land east of Israel proper. Israel has occupied it since 1967, and it's home to both Palestinians and Israeli settlers. Finally, there's the Gaza Strip. It's controlled by Hamas, a militant group that Israel and many Western countries consider a terrorist organization. Now let's talk about why Israel always seems to be on high alert. Imagine you're living in a house where some of your neighbors have explicitly said they want to destroy your house, and occasionally they lob rocks through your windows. You'd probably invest in a pretty serious security system, right? Well, that's Israel, but instead of rocks, it's rockets. Israel's main security concerns come from two groups: Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hamas is like that neighbor who keeps trying to tunnel into your basement, while Hezbollah is the one stockpiling fireworks and occasionally setting them off in your direction. Both groups have a history of attacking Israeli civilians, which understandably makes Israel a bit jumpy. Hamas, which controls Gaza, has a charter that calls for the destruction of Israel. They've fired thousands of rockets into Israel over the years. Hezbollah, based in Lebanon, is another thorn in Israel's side. They've got more weapons, more fighters, and they're backed by Iran. All right, strap in for a whirlwind tour of history. We're going back to 1948, when Israel declared independence. Several Arab countries attacked the newly formed state, and when the dust settled, Israel had expanded its territory. Palestinians call this the Nakba, or catastrophe, as many became refugees. Fast forward to 1967, and we've got the Six-Day War. Israel, feeling threatened, launched a preemptive strike against its neighbors. In less time than it takes to binge-watch a season of The Office, Israel had taken control of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and more. Then we've got the Intifadas. These were Palestinian uprisings against Israeli occupation. The first Intifada from 1987 to 1993 was characterized by protests and stone throwing. The second Intifada from 2000 to 2005 was much bloodier, with suicide bombings and military incursions. Throughout all this, there have been attempts at peace. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s were supposed to be the light at the end of the tunnel. Section 5, Political Dynamics, Israeli and Palestinian Perspectives. Now let's dive into the political soup that's been simmering for decades. On the Israeli side, you've got a spectrum of views wider than the Dead Sea. Some Israelis want peace at almost any cost. Others wouldn't give up an inch of land if you paid them in gold-plated falafels. The government often ends up somewhere in the middle, trying to balance security concerns with international pressure. Israeli politics is like a game of musical chairs played by 100 people with only 10 seats. On the Palestinian side, things aren't any simpler. You've got the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, which is like the student council president who can't actually change the school rules. Then there's Hamas in Gaza, which is more like the kid who pulls the fire alarm to get out of a test Palestinian politics is split between those who want to negotiate with Israel and those who think negotiation is as useful as a chocolate teapot. Section 6. The elusive peace process. The peace process. It's been going on so long, it should have its own pension plan by now. There have been more attempts at peace than I've had failed diets. The most famous attempt was probably the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. This was supposed to be the big breakthrough, the light at the end of the tunnel, but it turned out to be more like a firefly in a cave. It set up the Palestinian Authority and was meant to lead to a final peace agreement. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Then we had Camp David in 2000, where Bill Clinton tried to broker peace. The talks broke down over issues like Jerusalem and refugees. More recently, we've had various initiatives and roadmaps to peace, but they've all led to dead ends. Section 7. Settlements and occupation, a contentious issue. Now let's talk about something that's about as popular internationally as a skunk at a garden party: Israeli settlements in the West Bank. These are communities built by Israel in territory it captured in 1967. To Israel, they're like the garden gnomes of national security. To Palestinians and much of the international community, they're more like someone building a treehouse in your backyard without asking. The settlements are a major sticking point in peace talks. Israel says they're necessary for security. Palestinians say they're eating up land that should be part of their future state. International law generally considers these settlements illegal. But Israel disagrees, citing historical and security reasons. The occupation that comes with these settlements is another thorny issue. Palestinians in the West Bank live under Israeli military law, while Israeli settlers are subject to Israeli civilian law. Section 8. The Gaza blockade causes and consequences. Let's shift our focus to the Gaza Strip, a place that's been under blockade longer than most people have had their Netflix subscriptions. Israel, along with Egypt, has maintained a land, sea and air blockade on Gaza since 2007. That's when Hamas, which Israel considers a terrorist organization, took control of the area. Israel says the blockade is necessary to prevent weapons from reaching Hamas. They're worried about everything from rockets to underground tunnels. The consequences of this blockade on everyday Gazans have been severe. Imagine living in a place where electricity is more unreliable than a weather forecast, where clean water is scarcer than a politician's straight answer, and where unemployment is higher than a giraffe's neck. The blockade has also led to what some call an outdoor prison effect. Most Gazans can't leave the Strip, can't import many goods, and have limited access to the outside world. This situation has led to humanitarian concerns and international criticism, but Israel insists it's necessary for security. Section 9. Human rights concerns on both sides. Now, let's talk about something that's about as comfortable as a hedgehog massage: human rights concerns. Both sides in this conflict have been accused of human rights violations. On the Israeli side, there are concerns about the treatment of Palestinians in the occupied territories. We're talking about restrictions on movement, house demolitions, and the use of force against protesters. On the Palestinian side, groups like Hamas have been accused of serious human rights violations too. We're talking about indiscriminate rocket attacks on Israeli civilians, using human shields and cracking down on dissent within their own territories. Both sides have also been accused of arbitrary arrests and detention. These human rights concerns not only cause immense suffering, but also make it harder to build trust between the two sides. Section 10. International actors and their influence. This conflict isn't just a local squabble, it's got more international players than a World Cup tournament. Let's start with the United States, which has been Israel's BFF for decades. The US provides Israel with billions in military aid each year. The European Union tries to play peacemaker, but it's a bit like trying to referee a food fight while wearing a white suit. They support a two-state solution and have been critical of Israeli settlements. The United Nations has passed more resolutions on this conflict than I've had hot dinners, but enforcing these resolutions is about as effective as trying to herd cats. The UN provides humanitarian aid and tries to mediate, but it's often seen as biased by one side or the other. Then we've got the neighboring Arab states. Their stance has evolved over time, from outright hostility towards Israel to a more nuanced approach. Section 11. Cultural and religious significance of the land. Finally, let's talk about why this little strip of land is more fought over than the last slice of pizza at a college dorm. This place isn't just strategically important, it's loaded with more religious significance than a monastery's gift shop. For Jews, this is the promised land, the place where their ancestors lived for thousands of years. Jerusalem is home to the Western Wall, the holiest site where Jews can pray. It's like their spiritual home base. The land is central to Jewish history, religion, and identity. That's all we have for you today. Regardless of the side you're on, all we are hoping for is world peace. Congratulations for making it this far. If you have any insights to the situation, please leave a comment below. As always, do leave a like and subscribe to the video. It'll cost you nothing and mean the world to me. In the meantime, on the same theme of devastation, you can check out why South Korea is dying.